Do you feel the strength? Do you feel the power, the will, and the drive? I hope you do. Because if you haven't, you're about to in the Aries part of your chart, because Mars will be entering Aries on May 24th. I'm putting this video out the day before, the day of. You're going to watch it. Let's talk about this. I'll try to go through some just major key points in the 6 weeks that Mars is going to be traveling through Aries. I'll make some dates and I'll show you those things. But I've been waiting for this. A lot of people have had an interesting year with transits. Mars has been in Pisces for a while now. Here we go. We're ready to throw ourselves into the world wherever Aries is in your chart, or if you're in Aries, or if you have a planet in Aries, you're waiting for this. You want this. You have a bunch of air in your chart, Gemini, Aquarius, you want this because air and fire sextile each other. They harmonize. Take advantage of this transit. I'll pull up the chart for the ingress here. And there it is. There it is. There is Mars, 0 degrees. Here, I'm on the West Coast. I'm in Portland. Maybe I'm in Portland. You just don't really know. I could be anywhere. Who knows? I might be somewhere else soon. I don't know. 4:17 Pacific, May 24th, Mars enters Aries. Right here. Interesting few hours, actually, because the moon enters Aries right around this time. But right before this, the moon and Mars and Pisces are together. And then within a short period of time, they both move into Aries. You have a major opening and closing of a door energetically within hours on the same day. Like, it is like goodbye Pisces, goodbye to the dream, goodbye to the healing that came from the dream, goodbye to that imagination and creativity and the illusions and the fog and the the fantasy, the high idealism, the inspiration, the connection to the divine, all those things. We've had this Piscean story floating around, and it finally, the last planet, Neptune stays here. Outer body planet's going to be there for a little bit more. But we had Venus there not too long ago. Jupiter was there not too long ago. Mars finally enters into the fray. It wants to enter into the fray because it is a fray now. Now it's about imposing your will into the world. Finally, after months and months and months of certain types of transits, there's some physical action. And what I mean by that is there's the action in your head and the action in your heart. And then you take those things and then you put it out and physically into the universe. So yeah, there's a sword and shield involved here, but really it's about individualism and wherever Aries is in your chart. Now, if you don't know that, you can always hit me up. I could tell you where Aries is in your chart, but just if you do, you could take some action here. It's basically about take it, do it now, get it, go for it, basically. And we need this. I think a lot of us need this. Try to think about it in a positive way. The shadow side to this is there's no filters here with Mars and Aries. There's fighting and there's war and there's bickering, and Mars and Aries doesn't hold on for anybody else. It's not like if it was a Libra story and Libra's balancing the room and making sure everybody's taken care of. Mars is going to do what it has to do first for itself. So if you, wherever Aries is in your chart, it's about you first. If you have Aries planets in your chart, well, the fire is lit. It's interesting here. It's interesting how astrology works. You know, imagine if all these Aries placements were during the Aries birthdays, but that's not how the way astrology works. Every planet has their own speed, and the cycles are always changing, and sometimes you have that, sometimes you don't. Can you imagine someone being born, they're coming into the world today with with Mars, the moon, Jupiter, Chiron, and Venus in Aries? It's like, you know, and you imagine this? So there's people coming into the world where their chart is going to be this, with the South Node in Scorpio. Sorry, I'm laughing. I'm like, okay, that's going to be interesting, kid, you know? But anyway, just so happens we're in a Gemini birthdays with all this. And I think it's more than thinking. It's about the impulse and the taking built up energy and expressing it. Now, if you have had a project or something that's been brewing for a while, this is the time. If it has to do with the Aries part of your chart, this is the time, the next 6 weeks, to completely go full on force with the implementing of idea, implementing a project, implementing of yourself, your core, your will, the chase, the sweat that comes out of you, it's passionate too. We're dealing with Mars here, in a sense, sex and passion and lusting and burning hot. Okay, there's that part of it. That's cool. But again, I just said burning hot. Burning hot burns people. And so you have to be careful with this too. Harness the fire. Harness this creative fight that you have, the boldness of Mars and Aries, but you have to be careful you don't step on people's toes or push them over along the way. And there's no excuses for that. I don't care if you have certain Mars aspects in your chart, or you got Aries parts of your chart. I don't care what someone's going to say. It's not an excuse to F with somebody, mess with somebody, or push them to get out of the way. That's not, Mars and Aries can work that way, but that's the shadow side of working it. You don't want to be known for that. Because later on, you have some sorries to say and have to come back and go, hey, I'm sorry I did this, or I'm sorry that in that moment I was impulsively wanting this and that, and I didn't see anything else but that, and I didn't even take you into account, so on and so forth. Yeah, we know it's a Mars and Aries transit. It's about the self and you, but still, you're dealing with other people. You're dealing with the external world. You're dealing with an other. So you pay attention. Try not to burn down some area. And it doesn't, the competitive vibe of this is great to get things done, because Mars and Aries, it's a competing type of energy, but it doesn't mean that you have to like rub someone's face into something and say, ha ha, I won, I told you so. It doesn't have to be that. And that's the dark side of this. You got to pay attention to that. But to go back to the strength of this is it. Mars is going to make several aspects within days of this ingress. Well, first of all, let's get back to the moon. Already Mars moon off the bat. So it's raw energy, raw power. You got to be careful with this. If you're just entering the Mars fray and it's already wild with the moon and Mars together. And then the next week, basically the next 2.5 days, the moon is going to touch Jupiter, then Chiron, which is an ongoing story, then Venus. So it hits a bunch of planets here, and it's setting it up for Mars actually, but down the line. But just had to say those things. I'm trying to bring this with enthusiasm and force and fire and passion in my speech. And you need that. You need that in the Mars part of your chart. Some of you out there I know who've been watching my channel have heard me talk about the Chiron story. I can get into that in a second. But you know what? It's time to put yourself out there and be proud of the work that you're going to do, and feel that fire and feel that energy coursing through your bones and through your blood, and taking initiative and thrusting yourself into the world. How many words can I use here in the last 5 minutes? Okay, so let's go. I'm going to show you something here, and I'm going to see if I can move, if it's going to let me move by the day, and it is. So right here, I'm going to switch this up right here to this transit chart right here, and you could see now we're in the day later. The moon's already at 13, hitting the Chiron that I told you about there, right? Then we go a day later, the Thursday, the moon's still there. Now it's with Venus. You see that? And then this is all within a couple days. But what I'm getting to is right here. Now you could see Mars has already moved a degree, and it's already applying its conjunction with Jupiter. Okay, it isn't exact until it's going to be the Saturday, Sunday that it happens, May 27th, 28th. But it's already, so I just went through an explanation of Mars and Aries and the adjectives and the words I used. And then you have Jupiter, it touching Jupiter, which basically anything Jupiter touches makes it 20 times more. So you have a big, huge fireball off the bat with the Mars transit. It's not like you're lighting a fire and you're like slowly getting it going. It's like somebody came over and like took some gasoline and then threw it on a fire trying to start, and it went kaboom like that. This is Mars, Jupiter, and Aries. So saying that, if we're going to talk about Jupiter, and this is key here because I want you to to get perspective. Instead of, you're going to get caught up. People are going to get caught up in this fire. They're going to get angry. They're angry about something, or they're fed up with something. There's that part of it. There's the other thing of like the initiating a project, getting work done, and that's all there is. And then it's magnified by Jupiter. Remember, Jupiter's role in the end is to serve you a piece of wisdom after a while. It's to take you on a quest. And yes, it brings confidence and fortune at times, and it uplifts things. But in the end, it's about wisdom. And when you go too far, that's where the wisdom comes. You crash and burn. Or the other way the wisdom comes is like it's a quest, it's a journey, it's a slow mover. Now, Aries isn't a slow mover. So the type of knowledge that can come here on a weekend like this, it can come almost too fast, and you don't want to crash and burn. You don't want to like have no filters and smash into a wall and come into pieces and like, well, you just learned the hard way. There's a piece of wisdom. If I were you, anybody watching this, I would learn. And this is a learning moment. And this is kind of to help you with the rest of the 6 weeks of Mars and Aries. And also in the bigger picture, the Jupiter and Aries transit that will happen most of this year and then continue on in the beginning of 2023 for 5 months, is learning how to harness the fire, to keep it concentrated and dialed in and focused. Because this is where the true work comes, the true wisdom and the true lessons come. You know, you're going to see, you can catch people with Mars and Aries, and the impulsiveness is great for getting things done. But I'll tell you, they're the first person that can run out the door at full speed, and then they're the first person to crash on the ground and fall asleep. Like they went too hard, too fast. You see what I'm saying? That's what happens with Mars and Aries. It can be that way. So for me, it's concentrated fire. If you're thinking about how to keep something burning in a consistent course, but burning hot and still having the assertion and the drive behind it, there's a way to keep that fire steady. And I think there's a lesson this particular weekend on May 28th here with Jupiter and Mars of learning how to do something like that, because it's going to burn hot and fast right off the gate, right after the first 5 days of the transit. Makes sense? I hope it does, because I know for a lot of people, you actually might hear this and you still might crash and burn and you still might step on people's toes. You're going to learn the hard way. Ask any Aries actually that has been around for a while, and they will tell you about harnessing energy and like, well, when I was young, I did it this way and I should have been thinking. I should have been taking my time. In their world, taking time is just slowing it down a little bit. It's not like taking your time like a Taurus. Taking time. No, it's a different way of taking time out enough where you don't burn out. The fire stays lit. You feel me? You know, that's the 28th. I'm going to jump up all the way, and you're going to hear me clickety-clack through an important date, I think, here, and it's on the 14th. And here is 14th. Mercury's just coming out of retrograde. So that's something else. But this is important. And Mars is coming to be connected with Chiron in Aries. And this is hard. This is hard. You've been watching my videos. You know I've mentioned one of the lunations that happened this year had to do with this, with Chiron. This story is literally, at this point, hard, with Mars touching this Chiron wound. I think it, in a sense, can deal with metaphorical injuries, actual injuries in the Aries part of your chart. You have to be careful with this because Mars cuts and severs. And there's reasons in good times to do that. But if one is not thinking, cutting and severing can bring you more problems. So I'm just showing you both sides of this. Now, when you're coming to Chiron here in the chart, we're talking about cutting and severing possibly, but we're also talking about injuries. And we're also talking about older wounds and in the sense of old stories and memories connected to those wounds, and Mars will bring that up, will bubble that up to the surface. Now, again, you want to think in terms of a healing way, that sometimes you have to heat something up for it to boil down to its purity or to boil up and steam out. So I'm thinking in the sense of curative measures, whether it's mentally, physically, This is a week of the 14th to pay attention to, especially if you have Mars planets, Mars in Aries, you have planets around 14, 15, 60 degrees cardinal. This is unavoidable. This is a very sensitive time, and be sensitive with yourselves, and also be careful of what you say and do. And you don't want to harm situations, and you don't want to harm other people, because eventually harming other people really harms yourself. So anger is involved here, and I think learning to be angry in a way where it's healthy. And what I mean by that is there's ways to state your anger and to express your anger, because it's part of a natural healing process. You just don't want to go too far. It's one thing about expressing anger. It's one thing where you're doing things with anger to hurt other people or hurt yourself, and that's going too far. And those are the types of stories and narratives that can happen with something like this, along with the immense amount of healing too. To going back to exposing something, bringing something up to the surface, and then doing something about it. Because in the end, it's about taking action with Mars and Aries, and you could do something about it. I just like to show the shadow side of things. You don't want to regret things later on. I just keep repeating that. It's easy to do with Mars and Aries to regret things later on. And you have to remember to balance those things out and to talk to yourself and give yourself a break that, I did this to myself. I have to be careful next time. Or the other thing is like, with other people, that you don't hurt them. There's a way to manage this. So that's an important date. I'm going to skip up actually to July 2nd, if you can believe this. There's other parts of this transit, but July 2nd is an interesting one too, because here we have now at this point, Mars is almost out of the sign here at 28 degrees, but it's going to make a square with retrograde Pluto, and this is explosive. This is a huge power play. This is bombs literally getting set off. I wouldn't doubt it in the world that you saw a more warring factions. As a matter of fact, there's this whole Mars and Aries thing going on. If you think about it in a world level, on the internet level, this is where heightened emotions just come out, along with a Mercury retrograde that's happening in May into June. You're just going to have people just basically puking up words and getting into fights more than usual. So take note of that. But when we come here on July 2nd, here's Mars squaring Pluto, and this is hardcore. One of the most hardcore aspects you can have in astrology, Pluto squaring Mars or Mars squaring Pluto, and this is a power challenge. This is a power move. This is where compulsion, a subconscious compulsion, comes out to the surface. This is where there's the violence and hurt and discomfort and discord is involved. So take notice of this within yourself or in situations. You can always say in the astrology world, there's always a reason why there's a transit. Like you come up, well, that was the reason why. And that's the logical way of thinking. But this isn't the most happiest of things. This cardinal square that we have, it's pretty brutal. So just be careful of conflict. And if you are in conflict, know what the playing field is, know what the rules are. Do you have to be involved with it? Then know what the rules are to protect yourself. If you don't have to be involved with the conflict, then step away, like give yourself a break. But there's a tension going on here with Mars and Aries and a frustration. And in the end, Pluto always wins. Okay, I'm just going to say that. Pluto wins with the transit like this. It's going to, in the end, if Mars and Aries goes too far and it tries to will its power and in a certain way, Pluto is going to show them like, nah, that's not how it works. In the end, Mars and Aries can feel like they win something, but you sacrifice something. It doesn't have to be that way. So be careful of this Mars-Pluto thing. This can be very vindictive energy, impulsive, vindictive energy. The positive side of this is there are things that always come up to the surface with Pluto, and it's a chance to burn that out, to force it out and create a certain type of strength. Speaking of strength, now that we talked about that, I'm going to go back to a day. And I skipped something. I went ahead because I want to show you something about strength. On June 28th, several days before, you have 25 degrees Mars Okay, so it's applying the square to Pluto. It's happening, but there's a little bit of a hidden helper here. It's not so hidden, actually, but it's a helper. And we're going to look towards Saturn. At this point, it's retrograde in Aquarius. It's gone. At this point, it's gone retrograde. But Mars and Saturn are making a harmonious sextile with each other. Now, this is constructive. If you go back now, I jumped ahead. I went to January 2nd talking about this combustible energy happening with Mars and Pluto, and it's already building several days before, right? But with the Saturn aspect here is, this is foundational. This is work that builds foundations. Mars with the drive and the will, Saturn with the foundations and the limitations, and this is where concrete things come up from the surface. Focused storylines, focused agendas. You have to be careful of control here because Saturn and Mars is a control thing, but it's a healthy conduit considering the Mars-Pluto aspect that's happening here. So you have a little bit of a funny place, not funny, but a constructive place to deal with the Mars energy that week. It's just you got to be careful of the drama of Mars-Pluto several days later. But in general, this is a sneaky Mars Saturn sextile that can completely benefit you. I actually think out of all the aspects, the 4 or 5 days I've shown you, this one here is, especially at the later degrees, is like the finalizer, it carries you through the end with Saturn Mars, through the end of this Mars and Aries story, and the ingenuity of Saturn and Aquarius with those healthy structures and boundaries and foundations, with a new way of looking at things, giving Mars and Aries a perspective instead of just going straight in and straight forward, twisting the path a little bit in a higher mind way with Mars and Aries. And Mars and Aries needs this at this point. And this is where the gold is in this transit. Because like I said, several days later, when we get to the 2nd, we have this set off going on with Mars Pluto, but hopefully you have some foundations to help you with that, with what I just showed you. Well, within a couple days, on the 4th, Mars at 29 degrees is going to leave and be done. And hopefully by this point, you will have learned lessons of how to channel your will, your fire, your directness, your drive and assertion for yourself. It's really to build up your self-esteem, to get what's yours in a sense, in a healthy, expressive way. In Spanish, there's a word called ganas, con ganas. Like you do things con ganas. It's like with the will and the drive in a sense. And the important word here is courage. If you want to go back to 2020, I think that's the time when Mars and Aries was there and it was retrograde. That's something you can go take a look at, and that time there was lessons to be learned, there, especially with the Mars retrograde story. I'm bringing you to July 4th, 2020. Look at Mars and Aries right there. This is the 2020, okay, several years ago, is 4 degrees doing a Chiron hit. You can look to that month for the key to the Chiron story that I mentioned. But if you're going forward, you basically, am I correct by saying this? Yeah, there's Mars and Aries in November. It was retrograde. So go back to the second half of 2020 if you need a clue into some of this, of the storylines you had there and how they're coming up now, maybe finally asserting something, finally asserting your independence in the Aries part of your chart. And just think of the words of fire, courage, as in moving forth, pioneering wherever Aries is in your chart. Just be careful not to burn yourself and to burn others who love and care for you and want to support you. As someone who's got a family member with a lot of fire, who've had certain people close to me with fire signatures like this, I've been on the end of certain things of that, and it's not cool. And what I've seen over the years and with people is when they do certain things with this Mars and Aries energy, the more evolved versions will come back and say, hey, I'm sorry, or I saw what I did there. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. And that's an evolved way of doing it. At the same time, you want to appreciate this energy and vigor that Mars brings in your life or in someone else's life, because they're taking themselves to the limit and they're risking something in the world to evolve, to grow, to be a better person. And that is to be celebrated. So that's why I like this transit. I just showed you a couple things that are hard. Just remember, stand up for yourself, show your individualism wherever Aries is in your chart, take hold and use your muscles and your commitment and your passion to get things done. Just remember, be nice with other people too, okay? Like, it's almost like where you're on a trail and there's multiple bicycles going and someone's moving really fast behind you and they ring the bell, like they're like, to your left. And you Mars people, Mars and Aries rule people, Mars or Aries people, remember, you can ring that little bell and tell people that you're coming through, and that will make the biggest difference. So there's my quick video. I don't know if it was quick. Please support the channel. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the like. You can always hit me up for a free chart. I'll tell you where Mars is. I just launched a Patreon. Please go to my Patreon page. Support me. I'll start doing new and weird things coming up soon. On that note, feel the power of Mars.